Her son brushed off her hand, like it carried shame. Janet Cole, widow and former teacher, had raised him alone on 11 acres of hard-earned land. But at his wedding, in front of guests and cameras, Austin sneered, "Don't touch me in front of real family." She didn't argue, didn't flinch, didn't cry. That night, the only thing she touched was the deed she'd once meant to give him. And by sunrise, he was written out of everything. Silently, legally, permanently. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The moment she touched him, he flinched like she burned him. Janet's fingers had barely grazed Austin's shoulder, just a soft, familiar gesture, one she'd used since he was a boy afraid of thunder. But now, in the golden glow of the reception tent, he recoiled as if she were something unclean. He turned his head, not enough for the crowd to notice, but enough for her to see his jaw tighten. "Don't touch me," he muttered, barely moving his lips, "not in front of real family." For a split second, Janet stood frozen behind him. Her hand hovered, then dropped, a quiet retreat. In front of them, a photographer shouted, "Perfect! Stay just like that!" Click, flash, another fake moment captured. Lena glanced over her shoulder. A flash of something, satisfaction, vindication, passed across her face before she returned to her poised, bride-perfect smile. Janet stepped back from the receiving line, unnoticed. Waitstaff rushed past with trays of rosé and bacon-wrapped shrimp. Conversations buzzed, soft laughter laced with the sound of cutlery and clinking glasses. She disappeared into it like a thread pulled from a stitch, quiet, unnoticed, clean. Except one person had noticed. Clara, a waitress in black slacks and scuffed white sneakers, lingered by the edge of the tent, her eyes flicking up just in time to catch the moment. Her hand paused mid-reach for a wine glass. Her brow furrowed slightly, lips parted as if she meant to say something. Then she turned, blending back into her duties like it hadn't happened. Janet moved toward the perimeter of the lawn, steps even, heels crunching against the gravel path. No one called after her, no arms reached, no acknowledgement from the son whose shoulder she'd once carried through every childhood flu and every school award ceremony. Behind her, applause swelled as the first round of toasts began. She kept walking, past the floral arch, past the rows of white folding chairs now tipped with dew, past the rented golf carts lined up like trophies for people too important to walk. At the far end of the overflow lot sat her Buick, silver and slightly dusty, like everything she'd owned since Harold died. She climbed in, shut the door, and finally exhaled. The quiet hit hard, like being held underwater and breaking the surface all at once. Janet sat still for a moment, hands resting in her lap. She reached over and opened the glove box. The envelope waited where she'd left it. Cream-colored, thick paper, gold foil seal. Inside, the deed to the house and the land it stood on. 11 acres of Tennessee soil, family soil, soil she'd once planned to give away as a final act of trust. Austin's name was printed at the bottom, just above the blank line meant for her signature. A gift, a gesture, a legacy. She'd imagined handing it to him after the last toast, when the music was soft and the guests tipsy and glowing. She'd even rehearsed the words. "Your father built it. I kept it going. Now it's yours." Instead, her hand trembled over the envelope. She didn't cry. That wasn't her way. She adjusted her glasses, smoothed her dress, and stared at the name. The name she'd given him, Austin James Cole. A name she barely recognized now. Outside, the dusk deepened. The wind shifted. The faint scent of grilled pork and expensive perfume wafted from the tented reception. Someone popped a champagne cork and the crowd roared. Janet placed the envelope gently on the passenger seat. She turned the key in the ignition, the Buick rumbling to life with its usual cough. Pulling out of the lot, she didn't look back at the party. She took the long way down the hill, passing the old oak tree where Austin used to pretend he was a superhero. A hollow ache pressed into her chest. But it wasn't sadness. It was something colder, something settled. At the gas station just outside town, she pulled over under the flickering canopy light. The station was closed, just like always, but the signal was good enough for a search. On her phone she typed in, "Motels near me." The first result popped up, $59, no frills, 5 miles away. She booked it. Then, without thinking, she opened the glove box one more time and slid the envelope back inside. It landed with a soft thud, like something fragile but already cracked. They thought she brought a gift. She brought a signature. She never gave. The room at the Cross Timbers Motel smelled faintly of bleach and something older, like rain-soaked wallpaper that hadn't dried right since '94. One dim lamp buzzed on the nightstand. The carpet was tired, the kind that fought back when you tried to vacuum it. But it was quiet. That mattered. Janet set the envelope on the small round table by the window. She didn't unpack, didn't sit. She just stood there staring at it like it might start speaking. The paper hadn't changed. Heavy, clean, still sealed with the same gold sticker she'd pressed on with the edge of her thumb just 2 nights ago. The kind of envelope you hand across generations with a warm smile and a little trembling lip. Her name was already on the deed. Had been for 37 years. The plan had been simple. Transfer the land and house to Austin as a wedding gift. Something meaningful, more than money, more than a toaster or a check hidden in a card. The 11 acres had held everything, her late husband's blood, sweat, and backaches, her son's scraped knees and teenage tantrums, dogwood trees, a swing, a grave for a golden retriever named Duke. It had history. It had ghosts. It had pride. Now, her fingers hovered over the edge of the envelope. She sat down slowly, as if the chair might break. It didn't. The dotted line waited just beneath the fold. All she had to do was sign and drop it off at Mark's office. The whole thing was already notarized, witnessed by Patsy, sealed in good faith. They'd even laughed that day, Patsy saying, "You better make sure the boy deserves it." Janet swallowed hard and reached for her phone. 2 rings. Then a gravel-voiced answer. "Mark Tillman." "Hold everything," she said. Mark paused. "Janet?" "Yes." He rustled some papers. "This about the deed?" She hesitated. Then, "He showed me who he is." Just in time. A silence stretched between them, long and respectful. "I haven't filed anything yet," Mark said. "Your name's still the only one on the land title." "Good." She let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "Want to come in tomorrow? I can shred the paperwork myself." "Number, not yet." "Let it sit a while." "Let me sit with it." Mark didn't push. He never did. After hanging up, Janet leaned back in the creaky motel chair, staring at the envelope like it might accuse her. She thought of the way Austin jerked from her touch, like she was just some woman crashing the party, not the one who once sat through 8 nights of sleepless colic and gave up Christmas bonuses to pay for his orthodontist. She got up, took the envelope, and placed it back in the glove box of her Buick. Locked it. Back inside, she opened the fridge under the motel counter, 2 bottled waters and a packet of powdered creamer. She drank 1 water down in 4 long gulps, wiped her mouth with her sleeve. She stood in front of the mirror above the dresser. Her reflection looked calm, the kind of calm you get when a door shuts for good. She didn't cry. She didn't pace. She just watched herself, hand resting lightly on the wood edge of the dresser, then turned off the light. Outside, the neon vacancy sign flickered against the dark like a slow, lazy pulse. Austin and Lena were probably dancing by now, clinking flutes, bathed in string lights and applause. He'd call her tomorrow, maybe. Or not at all. But when he did, he'd expect warmth. He'd expect inheritance. She smiled once. It didn't reach her eyes. She wasn't going home tonight. At the reception, they skipped her name. So she wrote a new one, into the land record, bold and final. Janet's flats tapped lightly down the gravel path behind the reception hall, her steps muffled by the thrum of bass and laughter leaking from the rented tent. The music had shifted to pop now, something glossy and forgettable. Inside, the wedding was peaking, heels kicked off, ties loosened, cake smeared, and the bride glowing under string lights that made everyone look richer than they were. She didn't go back through the front. She knew better. The back kitchen door, still propped open with a rubber wedge, let out steam and the faint smell of lemon soap and overcooked green beans. Inside, the kitchen buzzed with closing clatter, silver trays being scraped, servers rolling napkins tight. Her purse sat under a coat rack near a stack of folding chairs, right where she'd left it. Janet bent slowly, brushing past a catering bin, and picked it up. She checked the zipper out of habit, then started to turn. "Mrs. Cole?" She froze. Clara stood near the walk-in cooler, arms folded, apron smudged with buttercream and wine. Her voice was careful, low enough not to carry but not apologetic either. Janet straightened. "Yes? You okay?" Clara asked, voice tightening at the edges. "I saw, earlier." Janet studied her. No pity in the girl's eyes, just recognition, witness. She nodded once. "Thank you for noticing." Clara hesitated, then stepped aside to let her pass. No more words, just an understanding sealed in. Silence. Out front, the DJ shouted something into a microphone. A wave of cheers followed. Janet didn't pause to hear it. Back in her Buick, the air had gone cool, the kind of southern night where the stars seemed closer and the grass held onto the heat of the day just long enough to remind you what you'd lost. Her phone lit up as she set her purse down. "Incoming call, Patsy." She answered. "I'm leaving now." "They didn't even say your name, Janet," Patsy said, breathless and sharp. "Not once. I sat through 3 toasts. They thanked the florist. They thanked Lena's aunt who booked the pianist. The damn wine sponsor, Janet." Janet exhaled, low and steady. "But not their mother." A pause. "No," Patsy said, voice hard. "Not even close." Janet didn't curse. She didn't vent. She reached into the glove box and pulled out the envelope, the seal still intact, the weight of it more like a brick than paper. She looked out at the empty parking lot. The only lights came from the tent and a distant barn lantern swaying in the breeze. At 11:32 p.m., she texted Mark Tillman. "Still have the documents ready?" He replied instantly. "They're waiting on my desk." She texted again. "I'm ready to reverse it." Another ding. "Come by any time, I'll update it immediately." Janet glanced at the dashboard clock. 11:38. She didn't hesitate. Not anymore. By 11:45 p.m., she sat at the edge of the motel bed, the lamp beside her glowing amber against the cheap drapes. The coffee table was cleared, her purse open, the deed flattened. The pen glided across the line with a whisper. Her name, Janet Eloise Cole, returned to the owner's space, firm and full. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like reclamation. She folded the document, slid it into a fresh envelope, and sealed it with her thumb. At 11:58, her phone buzzed again. Mark Tillman, filed. Effective immediately. She read it once, then deleted the thread. Outside, the wind had picked up. She cracked the window just enough to let it in. It smelled like honeysuckle and damp soil. Home, but different. Not his anymore. By Sunday morning, the wedding recap was everywhere. Janet hadn't planned to look, but when Clara texted, "Have you seen it?" curiosity cracked through the edges of her restraint. She sat at the motel desk, coffee in a foam cup going cold beside her, and opened Facebook with the same care one might approach a bruise. There it was, pinned to the top of Austin's page. A high-resolution carousel. Lena's dress billowing like a perfume ad, champagne bursting midair, his arm looped tight around her waist like he'd won something. The caption was long, too long. "What a weekend. Grateful doesn't begin to cover it. To Lena, my best friend, my future, my compass. Thank you for believing in me. To the vendors who made this magic happen, to the family who showed up, to those who've stood by me even when it was hard. You are the reason we could start this next chapter. Here's to love, legacy, and letting go of the past that doesn't serve you anymore." A stone dropped in her gut. She scrolled. Photo after photo, speeches, dancing, the sparkler send-off, but not a single image of her, no caption, no mention, not even the hollow courtesy of a thank you. The comments were worse. "You two look like royalty." "Such a classy event, every detail perfect." "She really elevates you, Austin." "Good for you." Janet closed the app, staring at her reflection in the motel's blacked-out TV screen. Her mouth was flat, her eyes unreadable. Then, with 3 simple taps, she deleted the app entirely. Account gone. Years of photos, gone. The birthday reminders, gone. Her son's voice in digital fragments, gone. The silence was swift. Clara messaged an hour later. Clara. That moment, it wasn't right. Janet stared at the screen. Her thumbs hovered. Then, Janet. You saw it? There was a pause. Then, a typing bubble. Then, Clara. And I'll remember it. Janet sat back in the motel chair, the vinyl sticking faintly to the backs of her arms. She reached into her purse and pulled out a bundle wrapped in twine. Old letters, folded neat, tucked inside since the days when Austin still wrote with pen and paper. She untied them slowly. Hey, Mom, campus is amazing. Thanks again for the help with tuition. I'll call Sunday. Sorry I missed your birthday. I sent a card. Hope it arrived. Lena thinks I need to set firmer boundaries with my past. I think she's right. We'll talk more later. The tone had changed, like the slope of a slow hill. First warm, then neutral, then clinical, each one a little shorter, a little more measured, a little less hers. She reread the last one twice. Just a single sentence. Hope all is well. Things are busy here. No sign-off, no love, no mom, just space where feeling used to live. A knock at the door jolted her. She rose, caution rippling through her body, and opened it just a crack. No one stood there. Only a yellow slip slid beneath the door. She picked it up. A name printed in sleek black letters. Across the top, Martin Thorne, Lena's father. Below, the note read, "Just confirming, once things settle, you'll be moving out soon, right?" No greeting, no question mark, just expectation, dressed like civility. Janet stared at the note, her breath slow and shallow. Not even a day after the wedding. They weren't wasting any time. Janet sat across from Mark Tillman in his office just after noon, sun slicing through the blinds in long white blades that lit up the dust on his mahogany desk. The room smelled faintly of old paper, citrus cleaner, and brewed coffee left too long on a burner. Mark pushed a folder toward her. "We can update the will to exclude him entirely. You don't owe an explanation." "I'm not giving one," Janet said. Her voice didn't shake. She opened the folder. Legal forms, clean and ready. Her name already typed at the top. The signature line waiting again, but this time, not for surrender. Mark leaned back, tapping a capped pen against his palm. "You still want to pass on the land eventually?" "Yes. Just not to someone who sees it as a stepping stone." He gave a short nod. "I've seen this play out before. Entitled children, fast marriages, image management. But this—" He gestured to the paperwork. "This is still yours to control." She glanced out the window, past the line of parked pickups and the dry weeds curling around the edge of the sidewalk. "I wanted to do something real, not just sit there waiting to be sold when I'm in the ground." "You thinking nonprofit?" he asked. "Preservation trust? Tax-free?" "Legacy," she said. "Something for the next generation. Something local." Mark tilted his head, approving. "Could name it after your husband. Cole Roots, maybe?" Janet smiled. Small, but the first in days. Harold would have liked that. The office door creaked open just then. Clara stepped in holding a clipboard and a manila envelope. "Sorry to interrupt. Brought the design mock-ups for the website project. If you're still doing the fund thing, I'd love to help." Janet turned, surprised. "You don't have to." "I want to," Clara cut in, genuine and firm. "You have more people in your corner than you think." Janet accepted the envelope and set it on her lap, her fingers resting gently on top. "Thank you, Clara." Outside the office later, the sun bore down on the sidewalk in waves, but the air held the promise of fall, cooler at the edges, sharper when it moved through trees. Janet drove home with the windows cracked just enough to let in the smell of hay and road dust. When she pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as always. 2-story white siding, green shutters, porch swing rusted on one chain. But something had shifted. She didn't go inside. Instead, she walked the perimeter of the land, the dogwood tree marking the old boundary line by the rear fence. She remembered planting it with Harold, how he insisted on doing it by hand, even though his back had gone bad by then. Now it stood tall, leaves just beginning to curl at the tips. A few cicadas buzzed lazily in the trees above. The soil was soft beneath her shoes. A screen door squeaked behind her. She turned. Patsy approached slowly, balancing 2 plastic tumblers of iced tea in one hand and a cigarette in the other. "Figured you'd be out here?" Janet accepted the tea without a word. They stood shoulder to shoulder, facing the open land. Grass stretched wide and thick. Birds chirped in little bursts. "This place knows you," Patsy said, blowing smoke sideways. "Not him. He just wore the name." Janet sipped her tea. It was strong and too sweet, just the way Patsy liked it. She didn't argue. A wind came through the trees, and for the first time since the wedding, Janet didn't feel like an outsider on her own porch. Back inside, she checked her phone. A new message from Mark. She tapped it open. "Mark Tillman. Just got a notice. Austin filed a homeowner's tax credit under his name, on your property." Janet's breath caught. She blinked once, twice. He had already claimed it, publicly, on record. He didn't even know she never signed it over. They filed for benefits. She filed for an audit. Mark had already started the paperwork by the time Janet arrived. His office was quiet that morning. No hum of a printer, no ringing phone, just the ticking wall clock and the low scrape of a pen as he signed his name. "They filed for a homeowner tax credit 2 weeks ago," he said without looking up. "State flagged it when they noticed the deed had never legally transferred." Janet stood by the window, arms folded, watching a sparrow hop across the concrete ledge outside. He thought it was his, acted like it was already settled. "It wasn't," Mark said flatly, "and I requested a freeze on any benefits tied to the parcel, effective immediately. It'll trigger a review." "An audit," Janet murmured. Mark nodded. "The moment I filed the discrepancy, the state initiated an internal review. Fraud, even accidental, doesn't sit well when tax money's none involved." She didn't smile, but she did breathe easier. "Good." That afternoon, as clouds thickened and the air turned heavy with the promise of a summer storm, Janet sat at her kitchen table, and waited. Outside, the wind rattled the shutters like impatient hands. The voicemail came at 3:17 p.m. She knew the number before it lit up on the screen, knew the voice before it spilled through the speaker. "Mom, I don't know what this is about. I got a letter from the state, and now Lena's dad's furious. You blindsided us. This isn't what Dad would have wanted. You know that." He paused, as if expecting her to speak through the silence. I don't get it. We could have talked. We still can. Call me." Click. She stared at the phone, then hit replay. Listened again. Every syllable stripped of ownership, like he still believed she owed him something simply because he shared her blood. Then she pressed delete. It didn't even feel cruel. By dusk, thunder rolled somewhere to the west, low and dragging. Janet stood barefoot in the living room, taping flyers onto trifold display boards Clara had helped design. Bright colors. Clean text. The Coal Roots Fund, Rural Literacy and Land Preservation. Clara arrived just after 6, the smell of barbecue still clinging to her denim jacket. "Printed 30 more, she said, handing over a stack. "Put a QR code in the corner this time. Makes it easier for folks to donate." Janet smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. "You think we'll get any takers?" "We already did," Clara said. "That librarian in Baxter wants to apply for the grant. She said no one's ever created something like this locally." Janet smoothed a flyer against the wood. "It was never supposed to be for him, not if he couldn't see it." Outside, the storm finally broke. Rain pelted the porch roof, rhythmic and hard. It washed the dust from the windows and rolled down the gutters like pennies dropped from heaven. At 9:11 p.m., Janet checked the mailbox. Inside, a crisp envelope with embossed lettering and a corporate return address she didn't recognize. She opened it slowly, careful not to tear the contents. Inside, formal notice. "You are hereby instructed to vacate the premises located at 1178 Briar Patch Road within 60 days. Failure to do so will result in further legal action. Thorne and Associates, Real Estate Holdings Division." She read it twice, then again. A low laugh escaped her lips, dry and incredulous. They were evicting her from her own land. They tried to kick her out of what she still owned. The envelope lay flat on the kitchen counter like a dare. The logo in the corner, Thorne and Associates, was printed in gold serif above a Nashville address. Janet didn't open it with dread. She opened it with a letter opener shaped like a hawk's talon and slid the contents out with surgical calm. The legalese wasn't even bolded, just another corporate missive masked as politeness. You are hereby instructed to vacate the premises located at 1187 Briar Patch Road. She blinked once, then twice. A smile broke across her face, thin, sharp, involuntary. She walked to the drawer near the fridge and pulled out a folded map of the county property lines, dated but accurate. Her address was 1178, not 1187. She circled the misprinted number on the eviction notice in red ink and drew an arrow pointing to the margin. Then she wrote, "Wrong damn house," in a careful, cursive hand. The printer on her side table chattered to life. Mark had emailed a prepped cease and desist template, and Janet printed it on her last sheet of resume paper, the kind she used when Harold needed something typed up for the co-op board. She signed it in black ink, date underlined twice. Patsy showed up around noon, holding a brown paper bag with 2 turkey sandwiches and a single can of cheerwine. "Tell me you're not even worried," she said, flopping onto the couch and kicking off her orthopedic sandals. "I'm not worried," Janet replied, sealing the envelope with the cease and desist inside. Patsy unwrapped her sandwich. "Good, because they think you're scared, but you're not building a defense, sis. You're building artillery." Janet allowed herself a small nod. "Let 'em file 100 more with typos. I'll be waiting." By 3 p.m., she was at the sheriff's office. The air inside tinged with copier toner and aftershave. Deputy Arnold met her at the front desk, eyebrows lifting at the neat stack of folders she handed over. Proof of ownership, survey maps, correspondence from their attorney, and this. She slid the misdirected eviction letter forward. "With an address that belongs to a rental house they don't even own." Arnold whistled low. "They really came at you with a water pistol." "Let them try the fire hose next time," she said. "I'll bring the hydrant." Back home, Clara stood on the porch, taping scholarship flyers to a folding board. Her hair was in a messy bun, smudges of ink on her cheek. "They actually tried to evict you?" she asked, incredulous. "They tried to evict someone," Janet replied, unlocking the door. "But it wasn't me." "You're not moving?" "I'm paving," Clara raised an eyebrow. "As in, metaphorically?" Janet didn't answer. She just smiled and stepped inside, the screen door creaking shut behind her. Evening came fast. The sky turned the color of bruised eggplant, heavy with heat and the static tension of a storm that hadn't made up its mind. The cicadas had returned, louder now, pulsing like a warning. The porch light clicked on automatically. She was washing the last of the tea glasses when she saw the figure through the window. Broad shoulders, loosened tie, dark hair pushed back like it always was when he was angry. Austin. He stood on the porch like he owned it. Janet dried her hands slowly. No panic, no trembling, just deliberate motion, like winding a clock. She opened the door. "Alone this time?" she asked, voice flat. He didn't answer right away. His jaw worked, throat tight. "You're making a mistake." She leaned against the doorframe. "I've made worse." Lightning crackled somewhere off to the west. He stepped forward. "I'm not leaving without a conversation." The storm hadn't broken yet, but it was circling, the sky low and moody, the air bloated with electricity. Austin stood just beyond the threshold, his shoes damp from the gravel, his eyes hard with the kind of urgency that only comes when something starts slipping too far away to grab back. "Mom," he said, voice sharp at first, then softened like he caught himself. "We need to talk." Janet didn't move from the doorway. Her hand rested lightly on the screen door's wooden frame. She could smell the storm in his jacket, wet earth, cologne, sour stress. "Start talking," she said. He cleared his throat, shifted his stance. "It was just a moment. Weddings are stressful, you've got cameras, people pulling you in all directions. Things get said that don't come out the way they're meant. Janet tilted her head, eyes narrowed. You told me, she said quietly, not to touch you in front of your real family. Austin flinched like the words had been thrown, not spoken. That's not what I... It's exactly what you said. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked away for half a breath before trying again. I was trying to keep the peace. Lena's dad was right there and he's... Janet stepped back from the door without a word. For a moment, he thought she was letting him in, but instead, she disappeared down the hall. When she returned, she held a manila folder. Thick, folded neatly, tidy like everything else she did when she made up her mind. She handed it to him. He opened it with the caution of someone sensing they were about to lose something they hadn't yet realized wasn't theirs. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. Deed. Refiled. In her name alone. Dated. Stamped. Sealed. No, he muttered. No, this was supposed to be... You thought I signed it, Janet said, voice flat. You thought the house, the land, the taxes, the history, me, were all just boxes you'd checked. He looked up, color rising fast to his neck. You're really doing this? After all I've done? She stepped forward, not aggressively, but deliberately. You gave away your place, she said. The moment you gave up your decency. He exhaled hard, as if trying to clear fog off a mirror. Lena's family's pressuring me, he said. They've put money into a house they thought we'd inherit. I told them... You told them what they wanted to hear. Now tell yourself the truth. His mouth parted, then closed. His hand tightened around the folder like he wanted to crumple it, but didn't dare. Dad would have... Don't, she said sharply, her voice cutting through the humidity between them. Don't invoke a man you barely mention unless you want a memory to argue back. He looked stunned. Not by volume. She hadn't raised her voice once, but by the firmness of it, the finality. His eyes dropped back to the folder. This is really it? He asked, throat dry. Janet met his gaze, her expression unreadable. I already did it. The screen door creaked as she stepped back inside. She closed the front door slowly. No slam, no rush, just the quiet click of a latch settling into place. Austin stood on the porch with the folder pressed against his chest, the thunder finally cracking somewhere behind him. The morning after the confrontation, the porch was still damp with thunder residue. Janet stood in her kitchen, coffee untouched, watching the sun burn steam off the field beyond the fence. It was quiet, suspiciously quiet, the kind of stillness that didn't mean peace. It meant something was winding up behind the scenes. The knock at the door was soft but insistent. Clara stood there with a thumb drive clutched in her palm and tension around her mouth like she'd chewed over what to do all night. I have something, she said. From the venue. Janet let her in without a word. Clara set the drive on the kitchen table, like it might bite. There's a security camera mounted on the main tent pole for liability stuff, slips, drunk guests, insurance nightmares. I asked for the footage the night of the wedding, just in case. Janet arched an eyebrow. And they gave it to you? Clara smirked faintly. Turns out if you keep your head down and clean cake trays for 2 years, people stop noticing what you ask for. They watched it on Janet's old laptop, screen dim and slightly cracked near the hinge. The angle was wide and unflattering, but the audio was clear. Janet reached. Austin flinched. Don't touch me in front of real family. Lena's satisfied half-smile. Janet retreating, invisible to everyone but the camera. No edits, no denial, just truth caught in pixels. Janet closed the laptop gently. Thank you, she said. I didn't mean to dig, Clara said quickly. I just thought you might want it, in case you ever needed proof. I hope I never do, Janet replied, though she left the drive on the table like a loaded bullet waiting for a chamber. But 2 days later, the footage surfaced anyway. An anonymous account posted a 30-second clip online, captioned only, "This is what real betrayal looks like." It spread fast. Facebook groups, Reddit threads, even a local gossip page. She's his mother? He really shoved her? She walked away like she didn't exist. Jesus, Janet didn't say a word publicly. She didn't need to. The internet had taken up her cause. The backlash was swift and surgical. Lena's followers, a curated blend of influencers and lifestyle bloggers, began turning. Brand partnerships quietly disappeared from her profile. Comments beneath her wedding posts shifted from praise to side eyes and second guesses. By the end of the week, someone had screen-recorded the clip and overlaid it with a piano ballad. "When the mother of the groom becomes a ghost." 2 million views and counting. Janet sat on the porch with Patsy that Sunday, drinking iced coffee while bees drifted near the porch rail. Clara arrived just before noon, face unreadable. "You didn't leak it," Janet said, already knowing. "I didn't stop it either," Clara replied. "Once people know the truth, they find ways of making it louder." Janet let that hang in the air. The bee buzzed past her ear. The sun sat low behind the pines. That evening the call came from Mark. He didn't waste time. "They want mediation." Janet leaned against the kitchen counter, the smell of brewed tea clinging to the air. "Who?" "Lena's father, through counsel, wants to arrange a meeting between you, Austin, and a neutral third party. They're worried about how this plays if it escalates." Janet was silent for a moment. Then, "They're worried about their name. They're worried about yours too now," Mark said. "It's gaining traction." She didn't smile, but she didn't sound surprised. "Tell them I'll show up," she said, "but I'm not bringing compromise." "Understood," Mark said. "You've got the leverage now." Janet ended the call. She walked outside as dusk settled over the property, fireflies rising like embers from the grass. For the first time in weeks, the land felt still for her, not in spite of her. The mediation room smelled like lemon furniture polish and old upholstery, civilized, sterile, forgettable. It was the kind of place built to convince people they were safe when the ground was already gone under their feet. Janet took the seat closest to the window, a single manila folder in her lap. Inside it was one sheet of paper, the updated deed, signed, notarized, refiled. Her name stood alone on the title, like a period at the end of a sentence no one else could rewrite. Austin sat across from her. The skin beneath his eyes was darker now, tired and thinner than she'd ever seen it. He wore a fitted navy jacket, no tie, fingers tapping a steady rhythm on the armrest. To his right, Lena sat ramrod straight in a bone-colored blouse, lips pressed together like she'd bitten a lemon and didn't want to spit it out in public. She hadn't spoken since entering. Between them sat Martin Thorne's attorney, a silver-haired man who looked like he'd charged triple for showing up on a Saturday. At the end of the table, Mark Tillman calmly unpacked a yellow legal pad and clicked his pen once. That was his tell. Just once. Always deliberate. "We're here to find a way forward," the mediator began, a man with a calm voice and a tie too cheerful for the room. "This is not a courtroom. No one is obligated to concede anything. This is about clarity." Janet set the folder on the table, slid it forward. "This is clarity," she said. "That document is not negotiable." The mediator opened it. Mark didn't move. Austin shifted in his chair. "I was angry. I know what I said was awful. I've said it in every message, and I'll say it again now. Mom, I'm sorry." Janet watched him, but not cruelly. Calmly, like someone finally seeing a storm from outside the glass instead of inside the funnel. "You're not apologizing to get it back," she said. "You're apologizing because someone recorded what it looked like when you threw me out." "That's not fair," he said, voice cracking just slightly. "You left before I could even—" "I left," she interrupted, "because for the first time I understood I wasn't invited." Lena still said nothing. Her fingers rested on the table like claws that had just been filed dull. Mark cleared his throat gently. "For the record, the property has been placed in a living trust. There are no plans for sale, transfer, or inheritance. The client has filed intentions to donate the land to a regional conservancy. Upon her passing, the property will be turned over to the public for educational and environmental preservation." The room tightened. "No resale value?" the mediator asked, glancing between parties. "No," Janet answered. "No equity. No leverage. No legacy for people who wanted none of mine." Austin looked gutted, like someone had slipped the air from the room through a vent he hadn't noticed. "But why?" he asked. "Why cut me out entirely?" Mark spoke before Janet had to. "Because this meeting is a courtesy, not an obligation." Janet folded her hands in her lap. "You married up," she said, "and I moved on." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of things not said, of years not lived the way she thought they'd be, but it was hers. The mediator looked to the clock. "If there's nothing else—" There wasn't. As the others stood to leave, Clara appeared quietly by the doorway, motioning for Janet to step outside. Janet followed without a word. Clara handed her a folded note, just one line scrawled in blue ink. "Someone else wants to help. Local, private, big." Janet raised an eyebrow. Clara nodded. "They want to meet." Janet stood on the porch in the early October chill, watching fog lift from the far side of the field like smoke off a cooling fire. The land stretched wide and golden, morning light brushing over the dying summer grass. It was quiet in the way she liked best. Nothing urgent, just birdsong and breath. In her hands was the charter for the Cole Roots Fund, still warm from the printer. She ran her thumb over the embossed name, Harold W. Cole, centered just beneath the foundation's seal. His name, his legacy. But it wasn't a tombstone, it was a starting line. The fund's mission was simple: restore neglected rural land and teach local kids how to read the landscape and their own stories. Nature and literacy, what Harold had loved, and what this place had always needed. Clara had built the site in 4 nights flat. "Minimalist, clean, real," she said as she showed it to Janet on an iPad at the kitchen table. "People don't want more noise, they want truth with clean lines." And that's exactly what it was. No long explanations, no dramatic statements, just the land, the trees, the creek, and a mission beneath them. Not once did the site mention Austin, not in bio, not in history, not in credits. His name had become a shadow Janet refused to chase anymore. She didn't watch the comments on his latest posts, but Clara did. "They're slipping away from her," she said one night, referring to Lena. "Brand deals, partner links, there's no formal drop, but sponsors aren't tagging her anymore. PR doesn't like mess, and this got messy fast." Janet didn't reply. She just kept sorting the envelopes stacked on her dining table. Letters, dozens of them, from teachers, from parents, from kids. One third grader from Smith County drew a tree and wrote, "I read a whole book under this today. Thank you for the land." Another, "My mama said this place is for us, not for money people." Each letter made something settle deeper in Janet's chest. A kind of grounding, not pride exactly, but rightness. Some mornings, Clara came by just to help laminate the kids' notes. Other days, they laid gravel near the old barn to create a walking trail. Word spread faster than expected. Retired teachers called. A local conservationist sent seedlings. A high school senior asked to volunteer as part of her civics credit. One Saturday, a group of kids showed up with rakes and gloves and a librarian who drove the van herself. "You've got the town's attention now," she said, handing Janet a tin of homemade peach preserves. "You built something with roots, not just a roof." Janet placed the tin on the table, looked out at the field beyond the dogwood, and smiled faintly. "You give people a reason to stay," the woman added. Later that week, while sorting mail by the porch window, Janet opened another small envelope, blue-lined paper, clumsily folded, no return address. It was written in uneven block letters, likely a child. "Thank you for not giving it to someone who didn't want it." That line hit harder than anything else. Not bitter, not angry. Just truth, scraped down to the marrow. Janet sat down on the steps, the paper trembling slightly in her hand as the wind moved across the yard, stirring the trees like applause. She didn't know who wrote it, but they saw what she saw, not just land. Legacy, tended. They carried the name. She restored the meaning. The old station's mic crackled as Janet adjusted her chair. The on-air light glowed red behind the glass, and the studio smelled faintly of paper coffee cups and vintage carpet. She didn't expect to feel nervous. She'd taught public speaking to teenagers for 20 years. But this was different. This wasn't a lesson. This was her life, laid out in front of strangers with headphones and questions. "Ms. Cole," the host said warmly, What made you turn the family land into a trust instead of, say, selling or passing it down? Janet paused before answering. Her voice came out low but steady, as if each word had been weighed in her mouth before crossing her lips. I was raised to believe that land is more than dirt. It holds stories, work, memory, and sometimes, she added, it holds the silence of people who thought it belonged to them just because they shared the last name. The host blinked, then smiled slowly. So you're saying this trust is personal? It's purposeful, Janet replied. Some things can't be inherited. They have to be earned. Back home, that interview played 3 times in a single day. The morning show, the noon rebroadcast, the late-night slot for insomniacs and truckers, and each time, more messages came in. Janet's mailbox began to overflow, not with bills or threats, but envelopes with children's drawings, handwritten notes from strangers, garden seed packets, and even a $20 bill folded into a letter that read, "For new gloves or sweet tea, your choice." The community had picked a side, and they weren't shy about it. Patsy showed up 2 days later with a crate of marigold starters and a plastic scoop. "Time we plant something visible," she said. "Not just for the kids, for you." They chose a spot by the fence line, near the old barn where Harold once hung wind chimes out of discarded keys. The ground was stubborn, but the roots pushed in anyway. That afternoon, they broke for lemonade and sandwiches under the dogwood tree. "You didn't just keep this place," Patsy said. "You renamed it." Janet didn't respond. She didn't need to. The hum of bees and laughter from the kids on the new trail answered for her. Later that week, Clara arrived with a power drill and a brushed metal sign wrapped in bubble wrap. Together, they mounted it to a treated cedar post at the base of the drive. Cole Family Land Trust, established for restoration, literacy, and public belonging. Janet stepped back and read it again, as if to etch it into the backs of her eyes. Not a monument, a direction. The next morning, just after dawn, a black SUV rolled slow past the front gate. She didn't need to walk out to know it was Austin. He didn't stop, didn't wave, just paused long enough to see the new sign, the new shape of what had been taken from his future and gifted to something bigger than him. Janet watched from the porch with a coffee in one hand and a ledger of scholarship requests in the other. When the brake lights blinked off and the vehicle disappeared over the hill, she didn't follow. She didn't even sip. Some losses don't echo, they end in quiet. But the quiet didn't last long. That afternoon, a certified letter arrived, stamped, signed, and delivered by hand. Janet opened it slowly, her fingers steady but cold. Inside was a notarized petition, filed under Austin James Cole, contesting the legality of the land trust based on undue influence and familial misdirection. She read it once, then twice. The third time, she laughed, short, bitter, not surprised. Mark was already waiting when Janet stepped into his office, the windows cracked to let in early fall air that smelled like cut grass and drying wood. A stack of folders sat on the corner of his desk, labeled, color-tabbed, sorted like a legal war chest. "He's accusing you of undue influence," Mark said, adjusting his glasses, "that you were manipulated, that you created the trust under emotional duress." Janet didn't flinch. "Manipulated by who? Myself?" "Exactly," he said, flipping open a binder. "But here's the thing. Austin made his bed on tape. His public statements, his social posts, even the wedding video, they all contradict that claim." He tapped one page with a pen. "You want to file the counter? We'll go after him for defamation, grounded in intent to damage your reputation, discredit your ownership, and interfere with a legal nonprofit." Janet nodded once, slow and deliberate. "File it." Mark smiled faintly. "Already did. I just needed you to say it out loud." Across town, Clara had already sent over the unedited security footage with timestamps and metadata intact. Not the trimmed viral clip, but the full context, from Janet reaching out in affection to Austin recoiling with contempt. The insult, the walkaway, Lena's face. It was all admissible now, scrubbed clean of ambiguity. That afternoon, Clara met Janet outside the community library, her backpack slung over one shoulder, a cold Diet Coke in the other. "He's seen the filing," Clara said, eyes flickering with restrained satisfaction. Went silent online. Lena posted some ambiguous quote about truth always finding its own light and turned off her comment section. Janet accepted the Diet Coke, the tab hissing open like a fuse. "What do you think he'll do?" Clara asked. Janet took a sip. "Fold." He did. 42 hours later. Mark called while she was stringing fall lights along the garden fence with Patsy. The call came through clean and short. "He's pulling the petition." Signed the retraction. "Issuing a public apology. Everything you wanted. Written. Notarized. Done." Janet didn't stop twisting the cord around the nail. What changed his mind? "He realized," Mark said, "you were never bluffing." That evening, a post appeared on Austin's dormant Facebook account. The background was blank, the tone overly formal, clearly written by someone advised to sound humble but not exposed. "I want to publicly acknowledge that my claims regarding the Cole family land trust were misguided, untrue, and unfair. The trust was created lawfully, independently, and in accordance with the wishes of its founder, Janet E. Cole. I apologize for any confusion, hurt, or damage caused by my actions and statements." Janet read it once, then closed the browser. "That's all?" Patsy asked, leaning against the porch rail. "No," Janet said, "that's just the part the public needed." Clara arrived just before dusk, her hands full, an envelope, a final folder, and a zip drive in a tiny velvet pouch. "Everything's finalized," she said. "Court records, land titles, digital backups, 3 layers of legal lock-in. This land can't be sold, contested, or claimed by anyone, ever. Not by family, not by heirs, not even by the state unless they raise the whole charter system." She placed the folder on the table beside Janet's tea. "You weaponized everything," Clara said. "Law, land, legacy." Janet didn't look triumphant, just finished. Whole. "He doesn't speak for this soil," she said. "I do." She took the pen from Clara's hand, flipped open the final document, and signed her name in a slow, ink-rich sweep. The setting sun painted her living room gold. Outside, the signpost read, "Cole Family Land Trust, untouchable, unapologetic, permanent." They skipped her at the wedding. She skipped them at the will. The invitation wasn't embossed or engraved, it was handwritten on recycled cardstock, each one sealed with a dried flower pressed between parchment. Janet called it a gathering, not a party. Nothing fancy, she'd told Clara, just people who kept showing up. By late afternoon, the yard had filled in the way the house used to during Thanksgivings, back when Harold grilled instead of baked, and Patsy yelled about overcooked yams from the porch. Old friends from her school days leaned against the porch rail, cups of sweet tea in hand. Former students hugged her like she was still grading their papers. Nieces and cousins unfolded camp chairs near the dogwood tree. Not a single person asked where Austin was, and no one needed to. Janet had positioned the long table beneath the tree, the one Harold planted on the night Austin was born, shoveling dirt while she rocked their colicky baby on the porch steps. Now the branches stretched high and wide, casting mottled light across checkered tablecloths and mason jars filled with zinnias and sunflowers from the new garden. The kids from the Cole Roots Fund arrived just after 5, some shy, some bounding toward the lemonade cooler with the comfort of regulars. Clara passed out name tags, laughing easily, her camera slung over one shoulder. "Look at this," Patsy said, handing Janet a plate stacked with deviled eggs. "You built a second family out of the bones of the first." Janet took the plate, her fingers brushing the chill of the porcelain. "I didn't build it. They grew here." The sun hung low now, dipping into gold and lavender. Cicadas whispered from the trees. A fire pit popped softly from the edge of the clearing. Plates clinked, laughter rose, and yet the energy stayed grounded, calm, deliberate, anchored. At dusk, Janet stood at the center of the circle, one hand wrapped around a glass of peach tea, the other tucked in the pocket of her cotton dress. "I won't make this long," she said. "We've all heard enough long speeches in our time, but I wanted to say something before the light goes." Everyone quieted. "This land used to be about inheritance," she continued. "Now it's about intention." Heads nodded. Glasses lifted. One child leaned against her mother's side, eyes fixed on Janet like she was telling a bedtime story. "Some family is chosen," she said. "The rest reminds us why." A soft murmur of agreement followed. Patsy gave a sharp little laugh and muttered, "Amen to that," before sipping from her thermos. Nobody toasted her in return, not in that loud, performative way weddings demand. They just held space, real, warm, and without expectation. Later, Clara slipped beside her as fireflies blinked across the back fence. "You know he won't understand this part," she said gently. Janet didn't flinch. "That's what makes it mine," she replied. He asked who she thought she was. She left him her answer in ink. The notary's pen clicked once, echoing faintly across the hardwood floor of Janet's parlor. The windows were cracked just enough to let the September breeze curl through the curtains, stirring the scent of ink, lilac soap, and rain-damp earth. Janet sat at the table, her posture steady, shoulders square. 3 documents lay in front of her: the updated will, the letter of instruction, and the permanent declaration of trust. All were printed on archival paper, thick and off-white, meant to outlive hands. "Ready when you are," the notary said gently. Janet didn't hesitate. She signed the first page, then the second, then the third, her name gliding across each one like she was closing the final chapter of a long and difficult book. Janet Eloise Cole. Each letter was sharp, finished. Mark nodded, collecting the pages and sliding them into a leather folder. "That's it," he said. "Your life's work locked in place." "Feels less like a wall," she murmured, "and more like a gate that only opens inward." No one asked what that meant, but Clara understood. An hour later, Clara joined her on the creek path, camera around her neck, a small scrapbook in hand. They stopped near the bench where Harold used to sit after mowing the field, a spot carved out between 2 sycamores, shaded and quiet. Clara knelt and opened the book. Inside were photos: the first flyer for the Cole Roots Fund, snapshots of children learning under a pop-up canopy, the new sign hung by the fence, the first scholarship check sent to a girl from Red Hill Middle. Last, there was a picture Clara had taken from the dogwood tree's lowest branch, a wide, open shot of the land as it looked now. Green. Used. Alive. "I printed these on matte," Clara said. "Less glare, lasts longer." Janet ran a finger along the photo's edge. "People will forget my name." Clara looked up. "Then I guess it's a good thing I carved it." They walked together to the bench, the same one now bearing a small plaque at its base. "In memory of Harold Cole, and in honor of Janet E. Cole, steward of soil and silence. Sit here only if you plan to listen." Janet didn't sit. Not yet. She traced the edge of the plaque with one fingertip, eyes steady. At sunset, she walked the entire boundary of the property. No phone, no clipboard, no companions. The air smelled of warm cedar and cooling stone. Her boots pressed into the damp soil where grass had just been cut and hay dust still clung to the air. She passed the garden, the swing, the barn, paused near the broken fence post where Duke had once dug every spring like it was his mission to reach China. The land greeted her in rustles, birdsong, and the hum of a world that no longer demanded anything from her. As she neared the dogwood, Patsy emerged from the porch with 2 glasses of iced tea. She held one out like a peace offering. "Never thought I'd live long enough to see you win a war by not raising your voice once," she said. Janet took the glass. "I didn't win. I just outlasted the noise." Patsy sat down on the porch rail, eyes following Janet's as they swept the horizon. "If they ask what happened," Patsy said, "what do I tell them?" Janet turned slowly toward her. A pause. A breath. Then, with a voice low and certain as thunder in the hills, "Tell them I touched nothing and rebuilt everything."